Night in the Woods is best described as a walkable visual novel. It's hard to say that I recommend this game to everyone, even if this game has one of the best character studies I've ever encountered in any game thus far. There are multiple sequences in this game that will leave you wanting more, that'll make you feel that empty feeling you have when you've just finished your favorite TV series. I say this game is best described as a walkable visual novel because this game is more about the character interactions. You're never going to completely feel comfortable with the platforming in this game, nor is the story going to blow you away. The exception to this being when you're hanging out with May's friends, either Greg or B, and you learn about their true feelings as each subplot occurs. If this piques your interest, then I recommend you stop watching and go play Night in the Woods, which is longer than most games, clocking in at an average around 8 to 12 hours if you're not rushing it. Night in the Woods starts with an opening about the story of how May's grandfather dies. He's one of those background characters that's pivotal to the plot. He's never shown but frequently mentioned. He even has his own subplot in the game. The official start of the game has May controlled by the player, just getting off of a late bus to her hometown Possum Springs. You walk left and are greeted by a janitor working on a broken doorway. He acts as a sort of blockage, forcing the player to get him a soft drink from the vending machine on the far right, acting as a tutorial for the many minigame sequences where you control May's hand in order to either receive something or give something away. You walk back and give the janitor the soft drink. He finishes the work on the doorway and exits the bus station. You leave shortly after and May wonders where the janitor went, and I kid you not when I say he is one of the most confusing characters in this game. Not only for the simple reason being that he always disappears after a brief interaction with the character, but because apparently he's the reason your character survives something that happens later on in the game. I'm not kidding. You walk left and May reminisces about her childhood in Possum Springs. You enter a small forest littered with trash and logs from a past truck accident, and we learn more about May's character and reckless abandon, as you're supposed to jump on an uneasy log in order to continue the shortcut. I guess this also counts as a tutorial that you'll be needing to interact with things in the game, but I wouldn't count it. You do this, and May almost dies. She even explains this as she lays on the floor. You continue on and enter an old park May used to play in, called Sawmill Park. There's more optional world building here as May hops up onto the old broken castle on the top of the boat. If you go far left, you see your way is blocked off by a do not enter fence. We get another tutorial on the jumping mechanics and make our way onto the cable wiring up above the castle top. May jumps off the cable wiring and lands in front of the cop's car. We learn that May and the cop are related. We also learn that May dislikes authority. Aunt Molly takes her home, and we meet Stan Borowski, May's father. May storms off to her old room in the attic. She's mad at her parents for forgetting to pick her up. As you may have noticed by now, I'm describing May's interactions with different characters, objects, and areas heavily. That's because that's the game's bread and butter. The reason the game works so well. If this game hadn't taken the time to make the world as realistic as it is now, I'm not sure that this game would have worked for me. If you've played this game, you're probably going to agree with me that the majority of this game's interactions feel like something that people would say in real life. And I don't usually say this stuff. I'm extremely hard to win when it comes to realistic interactions between characters in video games. I'm picky like that. You wake up, go downstairs, in which the second floor has a few things you can interact with, notably the birdcage and the door below May's room. You walk downstairs and Candy, May's mother, calls for you from the kitchen. You and her have a small conversation about why May left college, and May half-assedly exclaims that she'll talk about it later. Candy then changes the subject by bringing up May's friend, to which May asks if she's seen Greg. Candy says he works at the newly made Snack Falcon, and then we are introduced to a choice between either continuing to talk with Candy about the new things in Possum Springs, or tell her you're going to head down to meet Greg. These choices aren't really choices, though. They only further the plot for the specific character, or in some occasions will lead to the same interactions. Continuing the chat with Candy through the entirety of the game will reward you with a hangout session with her at Jenny's Field. I wouldn't really call it a subplot, more so a way for us to see the type of relationship her and May have. May leaves her home, and you are greeted with the title of this chapter, Home Again Part 1. This game has 5 parts. It's a long game considering it's made by a small group of only about 3 or so people. As May stands outside her house, the first thing most players will notice is how lively the neighborhood looks. There's 3 kids running around playing with each other, animals hurrying from tree to tree, and neighbors walking on the pavement or driving in the streets. If you go farthest to the right, you'll notice construction workers. If you interact with them, May explains that it's sinkhole season, which explains why we can't pass them yet. You go to the far left and are given your first optional conversation that isn't your parents, your neighbor, Mr. Twigmeyer. Twigmeyer is shown to be friendly with May, joking around about how she used to be a troublemaker as a child. He asks about her returning to Possum Springs, and you can either joke about the college burning down or explain to him that you're staying for good. You continue down the path in an entire different area of the game. There are 5 notable characters in this area. The first one most would interact with is right in front of you, Summers. Summers is a troubled bear with a knack for poems. She has one of those 7 potential subplots the character can run into on any of the runs throughout the game. In order to continue her story, you'll have to listen to all of her poems. You talk to her about college and go on your way. Down the road, there's a bird that can be chopped up as a neighbor who doesn't partake in Halloween. The one who puts up those notes on the doors telling the kids that don't have any candy and not to knock. Right next to him is Mr. Chazikov. He was May's teacher back then in high school. He's also one of the characters that has further story with him. He has to do with dusk stars, a fictional type of star that you can only see during the dusk with the special telescope. You learn about the dusk stars and their stories. May has a small conversation with him about returning home from college, and he asks May if she'd like to see the dusk stars with him. Whether you say yes or no, the option is still there. You continue down the path and see 3 kids you had just seen earlier while exiting your house. These are the Harleys, 3 children who just so happen to have the same name, or maybe they're all adopted, who knows. You have a small conversation with the 3 of them about the game they're playing, and one of the kids tells May to get lost. You walk down the lane, and the last of the characters you are able to interact with is Danny. Danny is a cat who frequently loses his job. It's sort of a gag. You see him with different jobs throughout the game. You talk to him about this, and he asks you how life's going. May brings up the fact that she's just recently moved back in with her parents, and Danny compares May to a teenager again. May doesn't like this and tries to explain to him that it's different. Danny doesn't get her explanation though, explaining it away as an adult without any of the worries of taxes or the need for money. May stops the conversation and heads off. Throughout the majority of the last 2 areas, most characters, with the exception of maybe 2, have shown some form of questionability when it comes to May suddenly leaving college to come back. Most of the characters shown some form of disappointment with May, Twigmire being the most obvious example, and some characters are actually hostile towards it, most notable being Danny. The characters have their reasons behind this. Danny wants his life to be better. He wants to be where May was back at college. For May to have thrown that away would anger anyone who's in Danny's place, frequently having to worry about unemployment at young adulthood. This comes into play more often later. It's actually a big part of the plot. Mr. Twigmire acts the way he does when he found May had dropped out, because throughout his life, he's seen May grow up and become more and more reckless. He wants to see her do something with her life. But when she comes home for good, officially leaving college, he thinks the worst just happened. Both Mr. Chazikov and Selmers are the least reacting to this, because Chazikov knows how May was like in school. Chazikov was May's astronomy teacher back in high school, and although she admires the stars, she doesn't actually want to learn about them, as shown when she's more interested in the fictional stories of the Dusk Stars, rather than the history behind them. Selmers isn't the one to blow things like dropping out of college up. Despite this, she does care about things like that, which is why she offhandedly states how weird it is to just up and leave college. As soon as May comes home, she's questioned for her decisions by neighbors and friends she's grown up with and seen throughout the town. It's already been known the reasons for her leaving are touchy, as shown with how she reacted with Candy asking why she left. This comes into play later. For now, let's continue with the day. You head off to the next area, and the first thing you should notice is a poster board. The thing you probably see in small air places like your local mall or school, where people post things for others to see, like job openings or garage sales. You can interact with the poster board. If you do, the first thing you'll notice is a missing person poster. The person on the poster is Casey Hartley. This is the first clue that something is wrong with the small town of Possum Springs. You get the general information that most missing person posters have, where they were last seen, and a small description of the last thing the person was wearing at the time of the disappearance. May doesn't comment on the missing person poster. What she can comment on, though, is a ball of yarn that's been placed onto the poster board. This is the only thing she'll comment on. There's another poster, one about a harvest festival the town does every year. And with the leaves on the floor around you, it only makes sense for a harvest festival to be happening. You back out of the poster and notice a tunnel on the right next to you. This tunnel is a disused trolleyway, now flooded to the point where people can actually fish in it. You head down and go to the far left, and you'll notice that the trolley tunnel goes straight to your destination. But we're not doing that yet. There's a few more notable things that we have to interact with. There's a deerman down here that's fishing. His name is Fisherman Jones. He hums about poems and songs to himself while fishing. Occasionally you can see him down here. Right next to him is a small food station called Trolleyside News. They sell pierogies and pretzels. You can talk to the man behind the counter, but he doesn't want to chat. He wants May to leave his food station alone. We learn from him that as a kid, May stole from the joint. May can either install his cooking or say that you've stolen better from the place. Later on, May can actually steal pretzels from him for a mini subplot about feeding rats, but that's not until a few days later. Continuing on, we see a large mural. We also see a group of 4 teens, 2 of which we can actually talk to. The conversation is pretty awkward, as the teens judge May for not being able to buy a bear, as she's only 20, or the lack of having a car. We go back to where the poster board is and head to the left. You can walk up the stairs above the trolley station, but it's blocked off. May states that there's a church up these stairs. We can go to the church later on in the game. The church is also where one of the 7 subplots is located at. Right next to the church, you can see a broken lamppost. This is also a cutoff area. It can be reached later on in the game. You walk down the path and see a group of people, 2 of which are arguing with each other. You can't interact with them, only see what they're saying. You continue down the street and see a small rat girl next to a memorial. Her name is Lori Myers, and she's one of the 7 characters with a subplot behind them. You can interact with her, but she starts a conversation first. She calls May killer, and May immediately has that face most people would make while meeting someone who's just made fun of you. We learn in the conversation that May has done something to a kid that wound up putting him in the hospital. All further questions about why are answered with a one-worded response, signs to us that May is uncomfortable with talking about the subject. The conversation ends and you walk on your way. You can interact with the mural and learn a bit more of Possum Springs, and also learn that May's great-great-uncle, named Anselm Borowski, fought in the war that Mira was in place for. There's nothing more to note here. We can head down to the next area in the town. You may notice by now that the first chapter in this game is centered around some form of disappointment towards May. She comes back to her hometown, and everyone she's interacted with so far has either mentioned something wrong she's done in the past, why she's not in college, or why she isn't acting her age. The reason this is so important is because May came home because she's searching for comfort in a place she knows. She still has the mindset of a teenager, even though she's an adult, and it's shown with how May doesn't mind messing with people's property, like how we're able to jump onto cars and mailboxes in the first area, or how May's comfortable with jumping up into dangerous wiring. This is one of the most important character plots for May in the game, the fear of going up. May is like this because of her past, but you'll learn more about this in the later parts of the game. For now though, let's get back to the last few parts of the first day. So you head down to one of the last areas you're currently able to go to. There's nothing you can interact with aside from the 2 characters at a bar named Miller's. They're trucking buddies who have a deep appreciation for Smelters, a fictional sports team in the game. And to the left of them are oddly placed boxes. This is so the player can't jump onto the rooftop of Snack Falcon yet, another blocked off area that you'll be able to get to later on in the game. On the far left is the Click Clack Diner, and the final area of the town that you're able to get to, which is also currently blocked off by an invisible wall, in which May reminds the player that the Snack Falcon is our destination. So you enter the Snack Falcon and you meet one of the 3 main friends. Greg is one of the few characters that's actually excited to see May back, and is also the only character to make May smile so far throughout the day. The conversation leads off to playful banter as the 2 catch up. The screen then switches to May standing inside this party barn, a place she used to come to when she was a part of a small band with Greg and Angus. The party barn is a small for sale building right next to the mural we met Lori at. We meet Angus, the second of the 3 main friends, and Greg's boyfriend. Angus is the quiet one of the group, though he does mimic Greg's excited attitude with May suddenly returning to Possum Springs. May and Angus have a chat about the party barn being for sale, and Greg runs off screen. B then walks in the party barn. B is the 3rd of May's friends, and it's obvious with how Angus reacts with B suddenly walking in that there's some tension between B and the main character. You have a small conversation about B replacing May's parts in the band. Both B and May have a small argument about who plays what, and Greg returned back on screen, telling May that she's playing bass for the song Die Anywhere Else. Before you know it, you're starting a Rockstar Ex minigame where you have to press the right button on the bass guitar you're playing with. There's a total of 3 minigames like this in the game. The sequence only lasts a few minutes, so it's not too hard. Depending on how well you play or how poorly, the character will react accordingly. One thing I'd like to add though is that if you intentionally mess up on the song, Greg and B will call you out on it, which I found funny. Angus will always say that you'll get better with practice. After the minigame, the group decide to go to the Click Clack Diner. The group small talks about pizza, and when they're done, May shows her inner child and asks where they're going to play out. B retorts saying that they all have jobs and responsibility. B working at the old pickaxe, Angus working at Video Outpost 2, and Greg working at Snack Falcon. We then ask where Casey is, flashback to the missing person poster. With Casey's name on it, we can only assume that they're the same person. The group goes silent and Greg states that Casey's probably hopped a train. During the events of May going to college, which is only about 2 years max, and she left college as a sophomore, B has replaced her bass parts, and Casey Hartley has disappeared from Possum Springs. The disappearance of Casey acts as a sort of red herring for the player. You're led to assume that this game at one point will turn into an investigation of the disappearance of Casey, where May and the band have to find out what happened to their friend. This never happens though, and you'd be fooled into thinking it would, just like I was. It does take part in the story, but not nearly as much as you would assume. For now though, let's continue. B breaks the silence by asking May why she's not at college anymore, to which May can either respond by saying screw school, or it didn't work out. Both end in B angered, judging May's decision to leave. This comes into play later in her storyline. Angus breaks the silence by stating him and Greg gotta go home and stuff. Responsibilities and all. The group leave the Click Clack Diner and spot an arm laying on the sidewalk directly in front of them. I'm not kidding when I say this was when I first thought that this decapitated arm had something to do with Casey's disappearance. The way it's laying right in front of the group, as well as the scene happening right after the scene that Greg had just explained that Casey had disappeared, made complete sense to me and many other players, I would assume. But it's just another red herring. It has nothing to do with Casey's disappearance. May pokes at the arm with a stick, and yet another false clue pops up. If the player pokes at the arm the right way, a tattoo can show on the arm. A diamond. This doesn't have anything to do with the storyline, just extra detail. I say it's put in there as a way to make the players think something's going to happen in the game, as a way for the makers of the game to mess with the player. Aunt Molly appears and tells May to put the stick on the ground. May and Molly poke fun at each other, and the cop tells the group to head home in groups, that it's not safe to go alone until she assesses the situation. Greg and Angus head home to their apartment on the street, and Bee takes May home in her car. Bee is the only one with a car in this game, by the way. It's one of those things. May tries talking more about Bee's job, and asks if Bee is going to take over the family business from her parents. Bee stops the car and tells May to get out. May forgot that one of her friend's parents died. This is a sign that May's mental health may not be as good as we had once thought it to be. There are other parts in the game showing this as well, most noticeable being that she left college and won't tell anyone why, as well as still acting childish in situations that most people would be stressed about, like having to move back in with their parents and treating people she knows poorly, albeit without actually meaning to. This is a bigger part of the game all around, mental health and how everyone deals with it. Both Bee and May have suffered from depression at some point in their lives. Bee seems to be going through the motions right now, and May must have had some form of depression during college. It's not obvious yet, but Greg and Angus deal with their own mental issues as well, but that's for the later part of the game. For now, let's finish the day. So May walks inside her house, and we see her dad sitting in front of the TV. May is still mad at Stan for not picking her up, but they make amends by acting like the past day didn't happen. May tells Stan that she saw a severed hand in front of the Click Like Diner, and that she poked it with a stick. Stan, as if May's done something like this before, tells her not to poke dead body parts with sticks, which I thought was funny. After the conversation ends, May heads up the stairs and goes to her room. There's nothing more to interact with. In order to further the game, you have to go to sleep. One thing this part of the chapter doesn't show is the dream sequences. There's a total of 6, but I'm not going to talk about them in depth because it does spoil the story for you. And that's all I'm going to talk about. If any of this at any point piqued your interest, I recommend you play the game. It's great for what it does well, and decent for what it doesn't. At the start of the game, I described Night in the Woods as a walkable visual novel, and although it's easy to describe a game with little gameplay as a visual novel, I don't really think Night in the Woods should really fall under that category, because it's a game bigger than that. Not that visual novels are bad or anything. Night in the Woods is a game about the middle class, dealing with life day by day, in a rundown town always on the verge of dying. It's about dealing with mental issues, it's about growing up and the implications that come with it. It's about family and friends and the fact that nothing lasts forever. But despite all of that, the most important thing that you should get out of this is, well, life goes on. Hi there, Fox here. Thanks for watching this video. I don't normally do things like this, but I want to branch out to different things, you know. This video will probably get a part 2 in the future, but I am going back to school soon, so part 2 isn't the top priority right now. I do gotta finish high school after all. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with this channel. It's gonna be hard for me to make videos since I'm only one person covering 2 channels that are extremely different from each other. You know, gaming and speed paints, you know, art stuff. I talk about that a lot in the other channel, check it out. I edit them a lot, and it takes a long time to edit videos, if you may not know. But I'll make it work. I hope you enjoyed the video. Night in the Woods has been one of those games that really changed my thought on life a lot. I don't know, it's one of those games, you know, one of those games you don't want to play a lot in fear of the amazingness of this game just kind of falling flat on you after repeated replays. But, you know, every single time I replay this game, it always feels like I'm coming back to my old friends, and I think that's what they were trying to do. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. I hope you have had a fun time listening to it and stuff. Hope it, you know, made you buy the game. I honestly think that this small group of people who made this game are amazing. Thank you, Alec, for designing this game. It's amazing. And everyone else, you know, the designers, the producers, stuff like that. Thank you for making this game. It's a great game, and I honestly think it's one of the best ones that I've played so far in the year. Alright, bye.